Hi, my name is Dale, and I'm an experiencer. I guess one of the things that's a little unique about my story is that I'm also a pastor. I pastor a small church in Oregon, and if that isn't enough, I'm also a YouTuber, and my channel is Observer of Anomalous Objects, and I talk about UFOs. I'm probably unique in that sense because I don't know anybody else in the field who's a content creator, who's a pastor. But hopefully this makes people more open-minded to the idea that, you know, everybody from every walk of life can be an experiencer. One of the things that started me focusing on being an experiencer is realizing that there seems to be a generational component for my family. My dad at one time had talked about seeing aliens. He actually thought they were chasing him. And then my oldest child saw beings in her room. And so, you know, it seems that it has passed on, you know, from my dad to me and now to my oldest child as well. Now, there's a lot of moving parts in my story, and so I've decided I'm not going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to start with the synchronicities, which ultimately were like road signs pointing me back to when I was 6 years old. And so the very first synchronicity that I dealt with was on July 7th of 2023. I'd bought a new pair of night vision binoculars, and so we were anxious, my wife and I were anxious to go out and use it. And we went out by Mallard Creek Golf Course. It was night. She took her telescopic binoculars as well. And we got really, really lucky because off in the west sky, there was this yellow object. And it was going from west to east. And it was like a round orb, but I'm pretty sure from the size, it had to have been pretty good size because it was at such a distance. But the crazy part is it went behind this tree, and when it came out the other side, it wasn't just yellow, it was now yellow, red, and blue. And so that was the beginning of the synchronicities that were taking place. The second one was more of a psychic type event. There's been times in my life where I've known things that I shouldn't know, but this was more unique in the sense that it was so specific. And if you don't know anything about golfing, because I'm going to be talking about a golf course and I'm going to be talking about golf balls, but if you don't know anything about golfing, let me just say that there are multiple manufacturers of golf balls. You've got TaylorMade, you've got Titleist, you've got Vice, you have Schlesinger, you have all these different kinds, and they all make multiple models of their golf balls. And so I'm guessing there's probably 150 to 200 different versions of golf balls. But anyway, my friend had hit his golf ball in a hazard, and as we were going out there to try to find his golf ball, something came to me like an impression. It wasn't like an audible voice, but it told me that I was going to find a Titleist Pro V1 golf ball. Titleist is the brand, Pro V1 is the version of that brand. And so I get out there and I'm looking and I don't see anything. In about a minute, my buddy, he finds his golf ball, and I'm just about to give up when I look down and there's something white underneath a leaf. And so I move the leaf and it's a golf ball. I pick it up and it says Titleist on it. And God is my witness. I said, what are the odds? What are the odds that this is a Pro V1? I rotated the golf ball and it was a Pro V1. And so that was the second synchronicity that took place. The third one took place in 2024, April 18th to be exact. And what I heard at first was what sounded like a helicopter. And I was trying to figure out why in the world the helicopter was on our end of town rather than where the helipad is. And I want to say this up front. We don't have any bases near us. We don't have any helicopter training going on in the area. So this was unique. The other thing that as I was going out the door to check this out, I thought it was life flight. My dogs, I have 2 German Shepherd guard dogs, and they bark at everything. And I mean everything. And I found it strange as I went to the door that they were both alerted, but they weren't barking. And so I went outside and I see the object in the sky, and it starts coming towards my house. And pretty soon it's literally hovering over my house. But the weird thing is it's too quiet. to be a helicopter. It almost felt like it was muted. And I'm not ignorant when it comes to helicopters. When I was in the Navy, I used to chain and chock our helicopter to the deck. When it landed, you'd go out there and put those things on. So I'm familiar with helicopters. And so as I'm staring up there at it, it's just above the tree line, and I'm worried it's going to hit the trees. I mean, it's that low. And that's when I realized there's no rotor wash. I mean, if that thing was really a helicopter, that rotor wash would have been blowing limbs all over the place. And the other thing I noticed is the fact that it didn't have any anti-collision lights. I mean, those things blink about 40 to 100 times a minute. And so it didn't have any of that. And so I'm just sitting there in awe, and it came back a second time. And this is where it gets weird. If any of you saw the Jake Barber interview, and he talked about the 8-gon and how there was this emotion or emotions that overcame him, and there were just, he talked about how beautiful it was. He experienced some sadness. He said he felt like it was a female entity, and it was just, you know, he's like crying. It was just overwhelmed. And that really, really hit me, because that was similar to what I experienced as I was staring up there at that object. It was like surreal. That's the word I used for it to begin with. He used the word religious experience. Well, guess what? I used those words as well. And it was like, it was just euphoric. It was like I had an encounter with something. I had I communed with something, even though I don't know what it was. Mine was different than his, in the sense that he said it was like he was possessed. I never felt like that, but I felt like I had contact with something. And after putting all this stuff together, I've decided it can't be a helicopter. Helicopters have rotor wash. Helicopters have anti-collision lights. And why did I have this emotional feeling of just like, a religious experience if it was just a helicopter? Why didn't my dogs alert? And so I was still kind of dealing with all of that. And that happened at my house. About a month later, and this is the fourth synchronicity, I go to my office, and I have a little bit of a problem with ants in my office, but I've worked out some neutrality with them. If they stay off my desk and leave my food alone, I won't mess with them. I hate killing things. That's just the way I am. But I noticed that they seem to be in the same positions on the wall. And after about 2 days of looking at them, I go, something's wrong here. And I went and looked, and they were all dead. There was about 12 of them on the walls. There was one that was on a curtain cord, and it was like it was peeking around looking at something. But the 5 that were going up in a row like this, it's like all of them, in fact, not just those 5, but all 12 of those ants, they died in place. They died instantly, and there was no trauma, there was no distress at all on any of them. And it gets even stranger, because 5 months later, I found 2 more ants, one on the south wall, one on the west wall. And we're talking 5 months later. And especially the one on the west wall, I have pictures of it. It looks in pristine condition. I don't know how an ant can die 5 months earlier and be in pristine condition. Now, the first thing I did when I found those ants, because I felt like it was extraordinary, because there was no sign of death, they all died together exactly where they were, is I have a friend that goes to my church, and he is a professional exterminator. In fact, he's had his own business for over 30 years, and he told me he'd never heard of anything like it. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have an explanation. People have thrown out prosaic ideas, and none of them work. None of them fit. The closest thing I can come up with, excuse me, is the fact that it's like they were alive 1 second, and they were dead the next. It's almost like time stopped and they died when it did. It'd be like me having a conversation with you, and then instantly we both died, and we're just exactly like we were when we were talking, and people would come in and see us, and the only thing that would be different about us is that we're dead. And so that was the other one. The 5th and final synchronicity, and like I said, these were all what I believe signs pointing me back to Coachella, California when I was 6 years old. And the last one was when I got back from Roswell. It was on July 10th of 2024. I was in my backyard. I was looking up into the sky, and I saw what at first I thought was a satellite. And so I get out there and I'm looking at it, and I've watched enough satellites to know that they go on a straight line. This one, when I look closer at it, it was actually oscillating. It was bouncing up and down. And so that's when it really started to get my attention. And then as I watched it, all of a sudden it took a right turn. And I just really believe that all of this was to get my attention, to go back in time to when I was 6 years old living in Coachella, California. In fact, the way I would describe Coachella is ground zero. And so Coachella seems to be ground zero. In fact, I found it interesting. They have a conference over there now called Contact in the Desert. And I think they've had like 11 of these conferences now. But it seems that I had my own experience at the desert many, many years before that. The thing that really got my attention, besides the synchronicities, is I have this reoccurring dream I've had for at least 8-9 years. And it's always the same, and it involves pain. And my understanding is that it's fairly rare for people to experience pain in their dreams, but to have that same pain over and over again multiple times over an 8-year period, I'm guessing 15, 20, maybe more than that I've had this dream come on. So I've always felt like that had something to do with Coachella for whatever reason. And the other thing that happened when I was in Coachella is that I had severe nosebleeds. I remember the white rag my mom put up to my nose. It was my right nostril, and it was just red. It was just full of blood. The other thing that happened was that there was this teenage girl, and at first I didn't think it had anything to do with my experiences, but when I was on my way to Roswell, all of a sudden this memory of this teenage girl came back to me. And the thing about the memory that is kind of troubling for me is that it's as real as any other memory I have. But anyway, the memory was when I was 6 years old, this teenage girl who was a friend of my sister's wanted me to sneak out with her at midnight. I'm telling you what, if you're a 6-year-old boy and a teenage girl wants you to sneak out and meet her at midnight, you get pretty excited about that. And so for whatever reason, and Yvonne Smith said this afterwards, people have these strange experiences, and at first they don't think anything about them. Like seeing a 5-foot owl. Well, that's just a normal thing until you really think about it. You know, there are no 5-foot owls. And then all of a sudden it hits them that, hey, there's something off about this. And that's what happened to me on the way to Roswell. And it's like, what does a teenage girl want to do with, meet with a 6-year-old boy? It just didn't make any sense to me. And so I go to Roswell, and Ben Hansen is speaking in one of the sessions, and he's telling this story of this lady whose dead mother shows up. And the dead mother gets her to follow her, and they end up on this craft. And as the daughter is looking at her mother, all of a sudden she turns into an alien. In other words, it was an alien pretending to be her dead mother. And of course, the way Ben described it, the lady was ticked. She was really upset because she had felt deceived. And so because that memory didn't make sense, because Ben told that story, I thought, man, I'm going to call my sister and I'm going to ask her about her friend. I never talked to her about it before because it seemed normal. And so when I called my sister, I got the shock of my life. She told me that not only did she not have any teenage friends at that time, that she was only 9 years old. But then she told me that none of her friends ever spent the night. And it just blew me away. Because that memory is, as I said already, it's as real as any other memory I've ever had. And the only thing I can figure out in that story, first I thought, well, maybe it was an alien pretending to be a teenage girl to lure me outside. But I think I've rested more on the idea that this was probably a screen memory. I'm going to talk about a couple of hypnosis sessions in a second. And I've come to the conclusion that I think it was simply a screen memory that was planted in my mind to hide being taken. Now, the other thing that happened in Coachella, and I didn't find this out until later either, but my sister would look out at night. In fact, on one night in particular, she was looking out of the duplex, looking up in the sky. The opening was about the size of a duplex. And the reason she was looking up in the sky is because she heard this low humming sound. And she said when she looked up in the sky, that this object had basically blotted out all the stars. And so she couldn't tell me what shape it was. And so I'm pretty sure that was connected. She said it happened several times. And so I have all these things going on. I have these synchronicities. Take me back to Coachella, and especially the reoccurring dream. That was very, very troubling for me. And so I decided, you know what? I need to go and be regressed to try to figure out what in the world happened, because there's so much that I don't remember. There's some I do, but there's a lot that I don't. And so I was talking to my friend Mario Woods, and I told him the stuff that happened to me, and he mentioned Yvonne Smith. And I'm not a very trusting person. I don't think a lot of people are probably like me. But when I heard Yvonne Smith's name, maybe it's because I heard it before, I just like, that's the person who's supposed to do this for me. And so then we set up, some hypnosis sessions. I went out, I think it was September 21st and 22nd, a Saturday and a Sunday. But I want to preface this so it'll make sense to you. I've had a lot of trauma in my life over the last 6 years or so. I lost my sister, lost a half-brother, and lost 2 childhood friends all within 2 weeks of each other. I had a family member who was very, very suicidal. And so what happens for me is that I tend to shut down. Emotionally, it's like I get numb because it's so much that I can't take it. And I was talking to a friend about the stress I was experiencing, and he had this great idea for me that I would, when I would close my eyes to go to sleep, I would envision a VHS. The stress was on the tape that was in. I was supposed to take it out and then put a new tape in it with nothing but pleasant memories. But I couldn't visualize a VHS player. When I tried to close my eyes and do it, I couldn't even visualize a banana. And so when I got to see Yvonne, and she got me hypnotized, I was worried that she might not be able to do that. We were able to give me glimpses. But like when I was in my house, it was almost like the only way I can explain it is like trying to watch a movie with your eyes shut. You can't see anything. And that's because I could not envision it. I could not put my mind to see this. And the only thing that really came out of that session is the reoccurring dream. When we went to that, my body started jerking and twitching. And so I didn't really want to go any further at that point. It wouldn't have really mattered because I couldn't envision it. But I really believe that has something to do with trauma of some kind. And I'm not 100% sure what it is. We'll be, this weekend, I'll be going to see her again, and we're going to take a second look at it. But I was pretty discouraged after the first session, and it wasn't anything that Yvonne had done. It was all me. Because if I can't envision things, if I can't put things in my mind, how am I supposed to play that movie reel? Of what's your memory if you can't see anything? And so I decided that night that I would work on trying to envision things. And I started trying to do it, and eventually I was able to see a stream in the woods, and I could see the little rocks, and I knew then that I had a breakthrough. And so I asked my wife to send me a picture of the duplex that we lived in. And there were a picture of us 4 kids with my dad. And so she sent it to me, and I started studying the picture. I started to get that image in my mind so that I would be familiar with it. And then I closed my eyes. And let me just say this about hypnosis. Hypnosis is simply a trance-like state. Have you ever been driving down the road, and all of a sudden you go, wow, where did those last 10 miles go to? That's very similar to being hypnotized in the sense that you're in a trance. You don't even realize what's going on, and you go 10 miles without knowing it. But I think my personal opinion, my thought on it is, I think I hypnotized myself. Because I'd just been hypnotized earlier in the day, so I think I just went back in. And I was walking to the side where the front door was in the driveway, And I knew that on the other side of the duplex, there was this field. And so up to this point, I'm in control. I'm walking, I'm moving. But once I hit that field, it's like all of a sudden I just started going up into the air. I didn't have any forethought of it. There was nothing that I was doing. It's like, I don't know if the memory just kicked in or what, but I start going up into the sky. And I want to make this clear. I wasn't afraid. In fact, Steve Neal, he's had the same experience. And I love the way he describes it. He says it's like his Peter Pan moment. And if you've watched Peter Pan, I mean, who doesn't want to fly around like Peter Pan? And so I was going up into the air, and I remember looking down, and I could see all these rooftops. I could see the countryside. And the next thing I know, because I'm pretty high up in the air, is I'm on a craft. And it had like tubing in it that was almost clear. And it went out, and all of a sudden in the middle of it was this like a ball, and it was either purple or dark blue, and then it spread out kind of like a spider web, but not as detailed as that. And then I'm out of it. Then I'm back, I'm out of this trance-like state. What was weird was a few months later, I was thinking about that, going up into the air. I was kind of reimagining going through it, and all of a sudden this image came to me. And it was an image of a tall gray, and the tall gray was the one in focus, but there were two smaller aliens in it. They were blurred out as the background was, but I'm pretty confident that it was a tall gray and two smaller grays. And one of the things that Yvonne asked me to do was to go ahead and draw anything I saw. And so I drew it, and for some reason I put a line right across, the midsection of these aliens. And I thought to myself, I wonder if that wasn't an examination table. That's what that line is. They were behind an examination table. And then I was watching Steve's video, A Child's Encounter, and there was this one shot where he's on the examination table. There is a tall gray and two small grays there. And guess what? They're cut off right in the midsection. And it was just like, wow, those things really get to me when I see something that is that similar. The other thing is on Richard Dolan's show, Peter Robbins was talking about his sister's encounter. And she described it almost identical to mine, that she just started going up in the air. And I know Steve had the same experience. But she also said she didn't have any anxiety at all. That there was absolutely no anxiety. The difference between her and my encounter, she saw the roofs and everything else, the roof of her house, is that she looked up and she saw the craft up there. And then the next thing she knew, she was on a craft. And what she saw was one tall gray alien, and then she saw a small gray. She ended up seeing more smaller grays later on. But that really just solidified, because those two other accounts just fit perfectly with the image that I had been doing. And my personal opinion on it is that if the story of me being on that craft, if it had kept going, that's where the tall gray and the two smaller grays and the examination table and all that up. I just hadn't gotten there and stuff. And so I was pretty excited going into Sunday's hypnosis session, because of the fact that I had the breakthrough. I could see the creek, I could see the water, I could see the little rocks and stuff like that. I was able to have the breakthrough walking by the duplex, having that incredible encounter. All of a sudden, like I said, without any foresight or foreknowledge or even thinking about it, it just happened. It's like it took over whatever it was, whether it was a memory or not. But I felt really confident going into Sunday's session that I would be able to envision things. I would be able to go deeper into hypnosis. And that's exactly what happened. About 12:30, we started. Probably 10, 15 minutes after that, she was able to get me under hypnosis, and I went deeper. And the one thing that we did right away, because of the teenage girl and the mystery of who in the world she was let's go back to that time period. And the strange thing about it is I could not get anything more under hypnosis than I had from conscious memory. The only thing I saw that maybe was a little bit more is I saw her going into my sister's room, but I think in conscious memory that was probably there as well. And so the next thing I did, because she wanted me to meet her outside, is I went to my bed, and I had the top bunk, and I was sitting there telling myself, don't go to sleep, don't go to sleep. But there was nothing else of that teenage girl. And so that's one of the reasons I believe it was probably a screen memory, because of the fact that ends with conscious memory. There's nothing else under hypnosis. So I think it was a planted memory, at least that's my opinion on it. And so I'm on the top of my bed, I'm saying not to go to sleep, and all of a sudden, this image of an owl shows up. And it shows up, and then it's gone. A little bit later, all of a sudden there's this light behind me. And I'm kind of trying to figure that out, because I'm in the center bedroom. There are no windows. And so where in the world is this light coming from? And then the next thing I remember happening is there were like these rows of bricks, kind of a brownish red bricks. They were going like this above my head. And then all of a sudden they flipped vertically. And the next thing I know is like a silo there. And then the next thing that happens is I'm in like what I can only describe as a cavern. And the walls are a little smoother, the same color of the bricks, and it's like I'm going forward and I'm coming back. I'm getting closer and I'm pulling back. But it wasn't like I was walking, it was like I was inside of something. In fact, I said I think I might be in a craft, and I don't know that for sure, but the strange thing about it was the exact same vantage point of when I went up into the sky. It was the exact same vantage point. It was like crystal clear. I could see everything in front of me. I never touched anything, but I'm in this cavern and I think, wow, this is strange. And then all of a sudden I come out and it's like this rock planet. It's got some of the most amazing, the way I describe them is they're like, mountains like this, but they're all over the place. They're not really mountains, they're like peaks. And I'm staring at that just going, wow, it's almost the exact same color. And as I'm looking at those things, I see several craft. One of them was the exact same color of the rocks. It was like it was camouflaged to look like this rock planet. And I was looking towards it, and if I remember it correctly, it was like I see this bright light up there, because these rocks go up and up and up as far as I can see going that way. And there's this light, and when my eyes focus enough to see, it's a crystal city. It's a crystal city, one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. But here's what's strange. Almost instantly the lights went out and you couldn't see it. In fact, I had another time where a light came on, and when it went out, it was like that blue static you see on a screen when you shut it down. Maybe they don't do them as much anymore, but in the old days, you would see that. The other thing that was interesting is that there was this object that was in the center of what looked like a small meteor belt. And it looked like gravity was holding those meteors around. And for whatever reason, I think that's an outpost. And when I was down below the planet, I went back again too, in like that cavern area. And while I was there, chambers would open. And sometimes I could see beings in those chambers. I couldn't see them clear enough to be able to tell you whether they were human or aliens, but then the doors would shut. And so this kept happening over and over again. And I still don't know if it was like they took me back in time and they were just showing me stuff, or if they actually took me to the planet. But the other thing that happened is at one point I saw them shooting at something. And that kind of fit into it, because like 5 times I wrote down everything I said. There's at least 5 times that I talk about things are camouflaged. And I go, I don't think they're afraid of me. And so what are they afraid of that they're camouflaging? In fact, if we went to that planet and we were looking down on it, we would say there's no life there, because it just looks like a rock planet. Yet under the surface, and those chambers that were opening and the different stuff that was going on, that planet was teeming with life. But like I said, if you looked at it from the outside, without knowing that, you would think that there was no life there. And I think that was part of the camouflaging stuff. And so that was about the time that that the session was ending. We were running out of time. And what Yvonne does is she tries to take you back to your safe place. And so I'm supposed to go back to this waterfall, this creek inside the woods. And the next thing I know, I'm on another planet. But this planet is completely different than the first planet. The second planet has like ponds in it. It has, everything's just manicured perfectly. It has plant life and stuff like that, but it's nothing I've ever seen on Earth. And then in the background, there's the most beautiful bridge I've ever seen. And, and I really wanted to stay, and I wanted to explore it, but we were out of time. And so then Yvonne brought me out of hypnosis, and we had a great conversation after that. It was remarkable, and I can't wait until we get back in on Saturday and Sunday to do some more exploring of these things. One thing I have learned through these experiences is that the more you open yourself up to this, the more that you perceive what's going on, it seems like you see more. You know, once you realize this stuff's going on, you realize that this stuff's probably been going on your whole life. Some of it you're not going to remember, but an example of this, of things continuing to go on, this was after my hypnosis session. This was a couple months ago. I was talking to an experiencer friend, and I had just barely began talking. And all of a sudden she said, "Stop." And I stopped, and I looked up at the screen, and like 43 minutes had gone by. And at most it should have been like 5-10 minutes, maybe possibly 15, but I don't even think that much. And so I'm looking at that going, where in the world did that other time go to? And she told me the reason she said to stop is that all of a sudden she felt like she was in a tunnel, and my voice started to intensify. And then she said, "Did you notice how we just started talking and all this time has gone by?" And so I thought it was interesting that we both independently realized that something was off. We both independently realized that we'd only been talking a few minutes, and yet 43, 45, whatever it was, minutes had gone by. And the other thing I wanted to say before we close out this video is I've had other experiences as well, not just with aliens and UAPs. About 8 years ago, I was in the church doing a memorial service for a lady, and we had all the doors shut, all the windows shut, and we had put the communion table in the center of the church, put the lady's picture on the right, put the urn in the middle, and then we had put some flowers on the left-hand side. And so I'm standing up there just to the right of it, and all of a sudden this wind, it's the only way I can describe it, this powerful wind comes rushing down the center aisle, and it knocks over the dead lady's picture, and only the dead lady's picture. Now, I didn't know this at the time. I discovered this later, but Josh Gates, like 15, 16 years ago, had been out at this Japanese forest. It was a haunted forest in Transylvania. And one of his guys were out there, and all of a sudden this wind hit him and knocked him over and actually drug him a little bit. And so I thought, wow, that's kind of similar to what I experienced. The other thing that's interesting about the word wind is in the Greek, the word's pneuma, and it also means spirit. And so wind and spirit, same thing. And I thought, to me, I'll always believe now, after I've processed it, that it was the dead lady's spirit, and she was making some kind of statement. I can't tell you what it was. It felt like she was upset because of the force that was used. Maybe that's just because it knocked the picture over. But so that was my very first ghost encounter. Last week, I was in my house, and something moved like 5 feet away from me. And this is after somebody told me that there are 3 ghosts in my house, 3 spirits, beings, and 2 of them are just there, but the other one seems to kind of, I don't want to use the word infatuated, that's not it, but intrigued by me, that's the word. And so I'm kind of, I guess, a little more sensitive that there's, these beings are in my house. But I thought at first, well, hey, that's just maybe a minor earthquake. That would explain it. About 10 minutes, a little bit more than that later, I'm in my man cave. And all of a sudden I hear something to my left move. And I'm thinking, well, maybe that's the cat. We have one cat that lives downstairs. And so I'm looking around. I can't find a cat anywhere. So I decided to go outside and see if the cat's outside. And I called Cal, which is our cat, and he comes running up the driveway. And so I'm already just going, wow, this is really weird. I'm sitting in my chair, I'm watching TV, I've got rabbits over to the right, I got a cage over there, and it was up towards the top, which the rabbits obviously can't get to. I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. I saw it move just like that. And so I think it's probably, maybe the ghost that's intrigued with me, maybe it's one of the other ones, but the point I'm trying to make is that once you realize, that this stuff is real, and once you start opening your mind up to it, once you start actually looking for it, you're going to see a lot more. You're going to see a lot more of that stuff. And so anyway, this is my story. I hope you enjoyed it. It is the absolute truth. This is exactly what happened as I described it.